gentlemen, welcome to the council meeting. I will now request my chairman to open the meeting with a prayer, which also allows time for personal reflection before we start the business of the meeting. Father Paul.
We pray for our Parliament and for our Prime Minister and all who hold authority in our land. But particularly we pray for our councillors as they set out priorities and make difficult decisions. And we pray for all the officers who advise them. We pray that the councillors may make these decisions with clear-sightedness and a vision for the Bay. Pray that these decisions will have compassion in them, especially for the weak and the vulnerable. Above all, we ask Almighty God for his guidance, and we pray for his wisdom on this meeting. Amen.
Thank you, Father Paul. Please be seated. The purpose of this meeting is to deal with a number of major issues for the well-being of Torbay and best interest of the community. My role as chairman is to ensure that today's agenda is dealt with efficiently and to allow fairness throughout the discussions. Also, as the meeting includes all councillors and the mayor, we are governed by strict procedures or standing orders. To make sure that the meeting is run fairly, I expect healthy discussions and respectful speeches by councillors, and I will not allow repetition as we have a lot of business to get through today. I will also not allow discussions, comments or barracking to be made across the meeting room whilst the invited speaker is addressing the council. Although standing orders allow individuals to be seated during their speeches, I would prefer, if whenever possible, councillors and the mayor to stand when addressing the council, so that you can be clearly seen and heard. Please note that the proceedings of the council meeting will be recorded. Therefore, ensure that you use your microphone when addressing the meeting and that it is switched off when not in use. Today, we are trailing a live webcast and the meeting will be streamed live on the council's YouTube page. We are not expecting any fire alarm testing today. In the event of an evacuation, you will hear the recorded message requesting you to evacuate the building. Please leave by the nearest exit. The Riviera Centre staff will assist you. Once outside, please assemble in the Lifestyle Members car park opposite the main entrance. Please also ensure that your mobile phones and iPads are turned to silence. We now come to apologies. Are there any apologies for absence?
Chairman, apologies for absence has been received from Councillor Sykes, and also Mayor Oliver has apologised that he'll be arriving slightly late to the meeting at approximately 6 p.m.
Minutes. I propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of October 2016 be signed as a correct record. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Parrott. Item 4, declaration of interest. Have members any non-pecuniary or disclosable pecuniary interest in any of the matters on today's agenda? Have any officers any personal interest in any of the matters on today's agenda? No, thank you. Item 5, communications and announcements. To make any chairman's announcements, of which I have none. Has the mayor, has a deputy mayor, on behalf of the mayor, any announcements that he wishes to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now's my chance. No, we haven't.
I understand the Chief Executive has no announcement that he wishes to make. Has the Overview and Scrutiny Coordinator any announcements that he wishes to make?
I have, Mr. Chairman, a very brief one. I'd like to thank the officers and the board members of Overview and Scrutiny as sitting as priority and resources. It seems to me, or feels like, we've had a meeting every day for the last 3 weeks, but it hasn't been every day, but it has been quite full on looking at the Mayor's budget. And we're now coming to a conclusion on that, and our recommendations will be dealt with at the Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting on the 14th of December. So as many members as possible who can come would be very welcome. But I would like to thank the officers, in particular Kate Spencer, and the rest of the team for all the hard work, and it has been hard work over the last few months. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Item 6, public questions. We have received a question from Swithin Long regarding the disposal of Christmas trees. Please refer to page 27. Mr. Long, welcome to the meeting. Would you please take a seat at the microphone? You have 5 minutes to present your question, and I will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining. This includes any time for supplementary questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. Long.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, councillors. Torquay run a very popular service collecting Christmas trees at the coach station in Torquay once the festivities are over. Sadly, over the past couple of years, Christmas trees have been dumped outside of the collection times, despite there being notices requesting that this does not happen. What action are the council and Torquay putting into place to ensure that the fly tipping of Christmas trees does not take place after Christmas 2016?
Thank you, Mr. Long. Councillor King, would you please provide a reply?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, sir, for your question. The Christmas tree collection is a popular service, and Torbay Council and Torquay make every effort to keep the designated area cleared regularly so it does not become unsightly. The only way to stop trees being dumped outside the designated times would be to deploy a staff member at the site 24/7, which isn't affordable and isn't a good use of resources. With the help of councillors and members of the public, we would ask you to let us know if trees are deposited after the allocated days by contacting Torquay or registering the issue with the council's call centre or by online reporting, and we will undertake to remove any trees as soon as practicable.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Long, you may ask a supplementary question as long as it is relevant to the original question and it's within your 5 minutes. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. The Executive League will probably know that there has been a history of fly tipping generally and with Christmas trees in that area. The Community Partnership and Friends of Upton Park and other local residents and community groups have turned the area into a garden. So it would be a real blight on their hard work if sort of fly tipping was allowed to sort of take place. In previous years, there has been CCTV installed to allow monitoring so that any action could be taken if possible against people who do fly tip in that area. Do I take it from the answer that that CCTV has been removed? Thanks.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Chairman. I would refer to my earlier answer, and we would ask you to let us know if trees are deposited after the allocated days, and we'll do our best to clear them up in a timely fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Long. You may resume your seat. Item 7, members' questions. The questions and answers have been circulated. I've been notified which questions require a supplementary question. The remaining questions and answers will be noted as submitted. For those members asking a supplementary question, it may arise directly out of the original question or the reply. Question 1, Councillor Darling, Mandy, to the Executive Lead of Planning, Transport and Housing. Councillor King.
Thank you once again, Chairman. Tortu provide a cyclate service to the authority to ensure that leaf debris is removed from the highway and that all of the 24,000 road gullies are cleaned at least once annually. Tortu make provision to increase the street sweeping element in the autumn period to take account of the additional leaf fall, and street scene inspectors will report any areas that require attention. Unfortunately, where we have autumn storms that combine strong winds and heavy rain, there's an increased risk of flooding due to the leaf fall being accelerated over a short period of time, and it would be impossible to take measures to prevent this. Tortu, however, provide an emergency response to deal with flooding issues in these cases. Also, if during the yearly road gullies are identified as being blocked, if these are reported to Tortu for cleaning and the numbers of gullies reported as blocked are recorded as part of the contract performance specifications.
Councillor Darling, I understand you have a supplementary question.
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for a response. Could you possibly provide me with the numbers of times Tortu have been called out on their emergency line to clear gullies, so that I can try and see the impact that this may be having on the capacity issues they have at present?
Thank you. For obvious reasons, I can't give you that information tonight, but I will supply it to you as soon as possible.
Question 2 by Councillor Steve Darling to the Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny, and I understand, Councillor, you have a supplementary question. Councillor Darling, your supplementary question.
To go straight into the supplementary, it's just previously, clearly Councillor King gave the response and then we went in the supplementary. Thank you, Councillor Lewis, for your response. What assurance can you give me that the findings will be made or the hearing will be heard within the time frame of the LGA call for evidence on this matter? Thank you.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, we will do our best to meet that deadline. It is a question of overview and scrutiny over the past, as I said in my opening remarks, 3 or 4 weeks we have been very, very busy doing the budget. It is in the work programme for early in January. But I must say to Councillor Darling, you know, the more help we can get on overview and scrutiny from other members, the better. And I know Councillor Sanders is really passionate on this subject of Europe, and perhaps he might wish to sort of join a panel looking at Europe, because I looked to see, I thought maybe he might be a bit busy. And I looked to see, but since June, he's only actually attended, I think, 2 official council meetings. So perhaps this is a chance for Councillor Sanders to actually...
The point of order is allowed. I'm not the questioner.
It's funny.
Point of order.
Point of order. This should not be allowed, surely, Mr. Chairman. And if meetings were held in the
Councillor, is this a point of personal explanation?
Is what it is. Quite.
I can explain it fully.
Councillor Lewis. Councillor Sanders.
Really? It's quite simple. I work for a living, and therefore I can make the meetings in the evening Very difficult to make them during the day. So if Councillor Lewis is saying that he will hold scrutiny meetings in the evening on this subject, I will do everything I possibly can to attend, if I'm in the Bay.
Councillor Lewis, please continue.
So I will have a chat with my dear friend Councillor Darling to try and find an arrangement where we can set up the panel as soon as possible, and I'm sure that Councillor Summers will take a full and active part in that, and we will get it done before we before the LTA report. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Question 3 by Councillor Mandy Darling to the Executive Lead of Finance and Regeneration, Mayor Oliver, and I understand you have a supplementary question.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the Mayor for the response that he gave. My question is there some sort of time frame when things may come to a decision ahead, as residents have approached me on many occasions saying that nothing seems to be moving and we're hitting some sort of stagnation with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I understand the Deputy Mayor will respond. Councillor Mill.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Mayor says that he has nothing further to say on this subject, but all I will say is obviously there is timescales that our planning department do adhere to, and obviously they will adhere to these with this subject. I'm quite happy to have a chat afterwards and we can sort something.
Thank you, Councillor. I now move to item 8A, notice of motion. Amendment to the Council's petition scheme. Please refer to page 30 of your documents. Would Councillor Steve Darling put his motion to the Council as attached to the agenda, notice of which was given in accordance with Standing Orders A14? Councillor Darling, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, and I'm sure I'll only take 2 because we have a busy agenda with much more important issues than this. It was just a little wrinkle in our system that I wanted to iron out. I've been petitioning to protect King George V playing fields as well as fellow Liberal Democrats in recent weeks. And probably once an hour you come past some poor soul who just doesn't know their postcode. So most people know what their address is, but their postcode sometimes flummoxes them. But also one does find that other people who are organising their own petitions fail to include the request for a postcode that we have on ours. So it just seemed a simple ironing out of a little crease here that we just say that name, address and signature and keep it as simple as that without the opportunity then of sometimes putting in harm's way petitions where they can be disqualified simply by not having a postcode, which seems somewhat job's worth. I'm aware that there has been published an amendment to this by the Conservative group where they feel that there needs to be a stronger clarification on your address. We're happy to accept that. We would have been happy just to say we're happy to take it as it is, but I understand it doesn't fit within the strict rules of a notice of motion, but we're happy to accept this once it's put, and let us allow common sense prevail on this little item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I rise to second.
Councillor Carter, do you accept the amendment?
Yes.
Thank you. We will now have that as a substantive motion. I open to debate. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you very much then. In which case, we want to make this very, very short. We've got a busy night. So I presume what's actually on the table then is that the requirements full address be amended to name or number, street and town. So effectively we're taking out the postcode, agree 100% with Councillor Darling. There are members of our community who have they don't understand from the Constitution that it said you have to have name, address and postcode. We want to make it as easy as possible for our communities to raise issues that are that they have within their ward, and I think that this basically just allows them to get over that potential hurdle, and more importantly, from a council perspective, as long as we have those details, it provides the council to be able to write back to that person. Clearly, you don't need a postcode in order to write there, as long as the details are fully explained. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any will to speak against this motion and the amendment? No? Then Councillor Darling, do you wish to comment? Then I propose we go to the vote. Those in favour, raise your hands high. Thank you, that's unanimous. Item 9, revision of council tax support scheme. Please refer to page 32. Can Councillor King please put his motion to the council?
Thank you once again, Chairman. Prior to 2013-14, the Department for Work and Pensions subsidised all expenditure on the old council tax benefit scheme. This ceased from 2013-14 when it was replaced with the localised support scheme and given an unring-fenced grant to cover the ongoing expenditure. In the first year of the scheme, Torbay's funding was identified separately as 11.9 million in the council's financial settlement from central government. However, from 2014-15, funding was no longer separately identified and formed part of the overall settlement funding assessment, which includes the revenue support grant, and subject to the same level of grant reduction. Since 2013-14, the overall settlement has reduced by 23%, so it can be assumed that the amount of council tax support funding has been cut to 9.2 million for 2016-17, in line with the overall reduction. This leaves an increasing gap in funding, currently standing at £2.7 million. To address the financial imbalance, it will be necessary to reshape the current scheme. To lessen the impact, the intention of the proposed changes is to reduce the deficit rather than achieve overall cost neutrality, where the cut in funding will not be passed on in full to households receiving council tax support. There are also a number of other changes required to bring this scheme in line with housing benefit changes announced in last year's summer budget and the universal credit legislation. These changes are necessary as the scheme is no longer financially sustainable due to funding cuts in the government's overall settlement grant. There has been a full consultation on these proposals, and it was said right from the outset that we would consult on the worst case scenario. We had 1,900 replies to this consultation, and it's important to point out that we consulted with people who received the benefit as well as those who do not. The consultation has indicated a level of support for these proposals, but we have listened and adjusted the proposals where we consider appropriate. So instead of an increase in the minimum amount payable being increased from 25% to 45%, we now propose a 5% increase over a 2-year period. This will be in addition to the technical and benefit alignment changes. We have removed 2 of the technical alignment changes as a result of the consultation. Although before you this evening is a 2-year proposal, the funding gap continues to widen. We are required by law to review the scheme annually, and any changes must be consulted on. I cannot rule out revisiting and revising this scheme once this 2-year proposal comes to an end. The changes proposed will keep rules simple for claimants, minimise fraud and error, and continue to support work incentives, as well as reducing the overall cost of the scheme. Finally, I'd like to assure you that claimants who experience hardship as a result of these changes will have their case considered on merit, as is currently the case, and may be awarded a top-up via the exceptional hardship policy. Please note recommendation 3.4, where we will review the policy in the new financial year.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I rise to second this motion and I reserve my rights.
I now open to debate. Councillor Stockman.
I'd like to put forward an amendment, please. That it's only a small amendment actually to what's already in existence. And the reason I'm putting forward this amendment is I've got grave concerns about how it's going to affect the self-employed. If you actually look at the saving that's going to be made, it's nearly £250,000, which should tell you the number of households it's likely to affect. From my memory, because I couldn't get online to see, it's about 450 households and it's about £12 a week. And we should remember that out of new businesses, 40% of new businesses fail in the first 3 years, and I don't wish to see them disadvantaged. So this is my amendment. The amendment is the council request the head of finance to review the exceptional hardship policy so as to consider an extension of the scheme to those impacted by the minimum set income for self-employed earners. It would give people then the ability, it would widen the hardship, the potential of people to actually apply to that. I have to say I'm not happy, I'm sure everybody in here is not happy at raising council tax on those people that are of working age in the Bay, but this is a particular part that I wasn't privy to because I didn't attend the task and finish group, and it was a bit that gave me most concern after the decisions that prior are over the scrutiny.
Councillor, would you like to read out your amendment?
So, the council requests the head of finance to review the exceptional hardship policy so as to consider an extension of the scheme to those impacted by the minimum set income for self-employed earners.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Mr. Chairman, I seconded the original motion, but I fully support this minor amendment. It has no impact upon the scheme, and I'm happy to second this amendment. If that's in order for me to second the amendment, thank you.
It is. Thank you, Councillor. We will have a debate on this amendment. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, note that at the overview and scrutiny meeting, the actual initial recommendation was approved by all but Councillor Stockman. So bearing that in mind, I think Councillor Stockman is a realist, that this makes a better deal out of a bad deal, if you like to call it that way. It does address the issue regarding self-employed, and recognising how it was approved at overview and scrutiny, I think she's done well to put forward this amendment, and I thank Councillor Timon for his support.
Councillor Thomas. David.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Chairman. I will be supporting the amendment, and I think for clarification, I would request if you would ask the proposer if he would accept, because I think that the proposer is probably minded to accept. I can't speak for him, but I think from to help move the meeting along, it may be helpful if it's allowable. Thank you.
Councillor King, are you prepared to accept the amendment?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's a very minor amendment, and I'll be happy to vote for it.
Councillor King, can we be clear? You'll be voting for it as an amendment, or you're prepared to incorporate it into the motion before the council?
I'm happy to take advice, but if it can be incorporated into the motion, then I'm quite happy to do that.
And your seconder, Councillor Timon, I'm presuming that you're happy, content with that also?
Then we will take that as the substantive motion. Is there any debate? Councillor Darling, Steve?
I would like to first of all talk about the amendment as it stands. I think that one has great sympathy with this amendment, but as with most things in life, one has to follow the money. And unless it was bringing a bag of money across to it, one does question how valued this amendment will be. When one looks at the schemes across Devon as a whole, that's an interesting comparator. There are 10 local authorities. Of those authorities, Torbay will actually head towards, according to the figures that I understand, having the lowest level of subsidy of any local authority in Devon at 70%. Whereas you only need to go as far as Cambridge, just on our borders, and if you are on benefits, you get 100% subsidy. And where is the justice in that? It is almost as if we're trying to ethnically cleanse the poor from Torbay. I have grave concerns about this. I understand what some colleagues may feel that, well, the colleagues were going to do, they were going to, as the lead councillor on this said, make a brave decision and massively increase the subsidy that would be expected to pay by up to 40% by those. But the reality is, I'm sure that was just a ruse. And I had people in tears on the phone to me about this when it initially came out on Spotlight. So I think that it is a great shame that the consultation scared so many people in our communities. And when one sees that we are truly an outsider on this issue, and it does make me wonder, in a time when we've got deprivation actually going the wrong way in Torbay, we're hitting the poorest the hardest. And I wonder if Mayor Oliver and his executive should go and take some lessons from their Conservative neighbours in Cambridge to see how they're able to balance the books better than Torbay and not punish the poor as they appear to be by their proposals here this evening. Thank you.
Councillor Sanders?
I have a question about the amendment, and then I would, with your permission, like to talk to the motion as a whole. I'll just deal with the question on the amendment. It is simply this. My understanding, there are several triggers which prevent you from receiving assistance, and in designating a group of people by occupation does not remove those other triggers. So, or does it? Because if it does, you could have the perverse situation where somebody who is self-employed has relatively little income and therefore qualifies, but actually still has assets well in excess of the amount that's laid down in the associated documents. So I'd like clarity that when we're talking about self-employed people, or any group of people, whatever, were amended, if anybody had a single amendment for a different section of the labour market, that it doesn't include those other factors, because if it does include those other factors, what is the point? Because surely it makes absolutely no difference. They'll be treated the same as everybody else. That was my question, which I don't know whether the proposer to the amendment can answer that if she gets an opportunity to sum up. May I now speak to the motion as a whole?
You have 5 minutes in total.
Is one not allowed, on a standing order, to one
Councillor, the process that went before, although there was a proposed amendment, Councillor King actually accepted that, so the amendment was incorporated in, so we do only have one matter before you, so it's speaking about it in the totality.
Right, well, I can go back to the welfare system. The welfare system is based on
Microphone, Councillor.
the welfare system is based on the subsistence level income principle. Unfortunately, over the past 6 years, the welfare system has been subjected to a 1% rise, which has been a below inflation rise. So even before you put into place a council tax rise, the 2% on top of that for community care, the people who are in receipt of council tax benefit, who receive it because they are deemed so poor that they need it, they will have less money next year than they had this year. Now, on top of that, you are going to reduce their discount and force them to pay even more. And I just remind members who went to an afternoon meeting, which I was able to make, which looked at the impact of universal benefit, we were told that between 25 and 28,000 households will be moved to universal credit by 2020. We were also told that the collection rate for council tax overall is 97%, but for those in receipt of council tax benefit, it is in the 60%. You are going to get a falling collection rate for council tax, and the only people who will benefit from this will be the bailiffs. You will put even greater hardship financially on people, and we know that financial hardship leads to family breakdown leads to homelessness, and the need for more housing, and homelessness leads to rough sleeping. So here's an opportunity to prevent future homelessness and demand for housing, future rough sleeping, maintaining a decent collection rate for council tax that doesn't incur penalty, and at the same time, remember, people on welfare spend just about every penny they get in the local
You have
economy.
30 seconds.
I think I've said it all.
Councillor Lewis.
Don't know where to start, really. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank my colleague, Councillor Tynan, for chairing the Task and Finish group on this subject. We had a series of meetings, cross-party. The Lib Dems in the end were fully supportive, and I thank them for that. Councillor Dunning is nodding his head. They were fully supportive.
Can I have a point of personal explanation? That sounds, Councillor Lewis is misleading the meeting, and it is very naughty of him, once again misleading the meeting. He made it sound as if those task and finish groups were in an agreement. May I just make assurance that when I was at those task and finish groups, I did not commit at all. I raised grave concerns, as alluded to by colleagues already this evening, because we should not be balancing this.
Thank you, Councillor.
Can I just finish my sentence? We should not be balancing this council's budget on the backs of the poor. Thank you.
Councillor Lewis.
Mr. Chairman, very interesting point by Councillor Darling, but it actually came to the full overview and scrutiny board meeting, where people were asked for their views. It wasn't the Task and Finish group. The Task and Finish group came up with recommendations that then came to the board. So it wasn't the Task and Finish group, which I'm pleased the Lib Dems, and they had their input, and the Independents had their input. UKIP weren't there, but I think that they were on holiday at the time. But the essence is that the Task and Finish group, the Lib Dems could have put their views, and they did. We then brought it to the board meeting with the recommendation.
Point of personal explanation, Chairman. The reality is that I was actually at the board meeting where this was approved, and I listened to it. Thank you very much. So UKIP weren't on that occasion.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay. Councillor Lewis.
I'm glad
Mr. Chairman, this is
Harrod,
post-truth politics.
Sit down, please.
Lost my train. Then it came back to the board meeting. Councillor Stockman voted against it. Everyone else voted in favour of it coming to this meeting. So I hope tonight, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning of my speech. I hope tonight we will get the full support of the Lib Dems. We've now got the amendment by Councillor Stockman, which I welcome. So I hope everyone will be supportive. If not, please speak up, attend overview and scrutiny meetings and put their view across. Because otherwise, what is the point of having an overview and scrutiny board meeting? Everyone agrees, comes to full council where you've got the lights, the cameras and everything else, and they change their mind. That's the start. But I welcome what overview and scrutiny has done. And I think we've done a superb job in changing it. Not ideal in the ideal world, Councillor Darling, but we are living in difficult times. The hardship fund of 80,000 with the amendment of Councillor Stockman, I think next year we have to look at that. It was underspent this year. If we find that there are claimants, we must look at it so that they can feed into it. We may have to increase it, I don't know, but we should keep an eye on that. The other point that I would make, in the proposals that went out for consultation, the amount of savings was 3,000. We kept it at 6. I would have liked to have seen it gone up to 10, because what we don't want to do is disencourage people from saving for a rainy day when they need that money. And if they thought that if they didn't have the money, they wouldn't get the benefits, there's no incentive for them to save. So I'm pleased that it's remained at £6,000. I think this is a good report now, one that we have to look at year by year, or give it 2 years, see how it goes, and then revisit it. But I hope that everyone in the chamber will be supportive of this, as they have been outside the chamber. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor.
Members, just before we continue, could I just remind members, we've had a number of points of personal explanation tonight already. The process, as is dictated in the Constitution, is if you wish to raise a matter, you ask, and then before going into your response on it, you seek the permission of the chairman to continue speaking. So if I could just remind members of that and ask you to follow that going forward. Thank you.
Any further debate? Councillor Timon, you reserved your right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did, and I just wanted to make a very, very brief statement. I think we would all prefer not to have to make this increase, just like we would prefer not to make many of the moves that we are going to have to make in our budget deliberations over the next 3 months. By modifying the scheme, Councillor King has recognised the comments from the Overview and Scrutiny task working group and the board, and the scheme we've come up with does ensure that from the point of view of the basic increase, people who are claiming under this scheme will pay smaller cash increases than would people who are paying the full rate of benefit full rate of council tax without being on benefit. It's only a little bit smaller than would be paid. I wish it could have been more, but we do have difficult decisions to take, and I think that what we've come up with here is a balanced scheme that does not unduly penalise and yet asks people to make a reasonable cash contribution. To the normal person, the cash increase from this is in the region of 50, 60, 70 pence a week, depending upon the category of house we're talking about. It's, I appreciate 50, 60, 70 pence a week is a lot of money to some people, but I'm afraid that's the world we are living in as a council, and those are the decisions we're having to take. Thank you.
Councillor King, do you wish to respond?
I'd like to thank all members for the debate. There have been some good points made supporting both sides of this argument. Councillor Darling, I said from the outset we consulted on the worst case scenario. I have never ever wavered from that stance. This is not an easy proposal to recommend, but a necessary one to address the shortfall in funding following the introduction of the Welfare Reform Act passed by the last coalition government. Prior to April 2013, the government funded their own scheme in full. The government then passed over responsibility to local authorities, but then added, we're not going to fully fund this. Councillor Sanders, you were a member of the government during this time. You may have walked through the no lobby to satisfy your own conscience, but this legislation would not have got through without the support of your party. So it's a bit rich pointing the finger at the Conservatives. Your party had a big say in this matter. I'd like to thank Overview and Scrutiny finally for their help and support during the revised scheme. Thank you, Chairman.
We will now go to the vote, and this will include the amendment as was put. Those in favour, please raise your hands high. Those against? Any abstentions? The motion's carried. Thank you. Item 10, Council Tax Base 2017-2018. This report was circulated on the 6th of December. Please refer to page 123. Can Mayor Oliver please put his motion to the Council?
Thank you, Chairman. This report sets out the Council tax base for 2017-18. It is a technical report that is part of the 2017-18 Council tax setting process for the Council and the 3 other public bodies that preset on Torbay Council. Tax base calculation includes the changes to the Council tax support scheme that have just been voted on. I therefore, Chairman, recommend it for approval.
Is there a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to second that and do not wish to speak as this is a technical report.
Is there any debate? Mayor Oliver, do you wish to respond?
Thank you, Chairman.
Then we will go to the debate, or to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hands high. Those against? Any abstentions? The motion's carried. Item 11, adoption of planning contribution and affordable housing supplementary planning document. Please refer to page 128. Can Councillor King please put his motion to the Council?
Thank you once again, Mr. Chairman. The Planning Contributions and Affordable Housing Supplementary Planning Document, which I'll now to refer to as SPD, is an important tool for developing the adopted local plan and making sure that developer contributions are prioritised according to corporate priorities. The previous SPD was adopted in 2008 and needs to be replaced with a new document that reflects the changing circumstances, and this is the document before us this evening. The Council has just received the examiner's report on the Community Infrastructure Levy, This has found that the draft charging schedule may be adopted and a report on this will be coming to Council in the new year. The broad approach is to negotiate S106 contributions from larger developments and use SIL for smaller sites. This approach has been endorsed by the civil examiner. There was a public consultation on the draft SPD between 19th of September and the 31st of October this year, and there have been a number of minor amendments in response to the representations received. I'll provide a little more detail on two of those matters. First of all, the test of lawfulness. The development industry was keen to ensure that the SPD met the legal tests, namely that 106 obligations should be necessary to making development acceptable in planning terms and must not be levied as a roof tax, and I believe we provided that assurance. And the second item is affordable housing thresholds. Now, this is an issue where there is no single right answer, and there were two workable recommendations put forward by the Mayor and the Council officers. The Mayor's recommendation is a threshold of 11 dwellings on greenfield sites, and that's because the government have stated that councils would use this as a threshold, and this was in a written ministerial statement at the 28th of November 2014, and was subsequently upheld at the Court of Appeal. The Mayor also considers that 11 dwelling threshold would reduce the financial impact on small developers. Officers have recommended a threshold of 3 dwellings for greenfield sites, and I fully understand the reasoning behind this. You can actually make a credible case for both. However, this is a policy framework document, and I therefore move the mayoral recommendation at 3.1 and 3.2 on page 126 of your report.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder?
Yes, Chairman, I second that and reserve my right.
Now, before I open the debate, an objection has been proposed and seconded. Then we will open the debate now. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. It is I who would like to move an objection at this point. And it's a policy development framework document. This is where it gets complicated, I think, for members of the public, because they don't understand, well, why can't you just move an amendment? You've moved amendments in other items before. So why, what's the difference? Why are you objecting at this point? Because it's a policy development framework document, effectively it means that it's a document that is brought forward by the Mayor. And in order to make any changes whatsoever on the first outing, and tonight is obviously the class of the first outing, the only way we can do that is to object. It's a simple majority to object on this policy framework. And that gives us an opportunity for the Mayor to rethink it and then for it to come back to have a further discussion. So that's why I'll be objecting. And what am I objecting about? Basically, our local plan, our adopted Torbay local plan, talks about on greenfield sites that we will look for 106 payments for affordable housing on a number of 3 dwellings on a greenfield site. We have seen in my previous time here at the council, when that number was 14, that cliff basically means that every housing scheme that comes forward, you see comes forward for 14 and never 15, because that escapes the section 106 affordable housing, and our community is worse off for that on every occasion. So we included it within the adopted Torbay local plan. The whole of this council signed up to that document, and that is our local plan. And so it's not unreasonable that we then go through to a consultation to effectively say that we wish that the affordable housing and the planning contributions to start from 3. And that's what we went out for consultation for. We consulted from September to October of this year on 3, and it was only then when it comes in at some point later that the Mayor decides he wishes to increase that to 11. Well, we haven't done any consultation on that at all. We've done all the consultation on 3. It makes sense for the council to have a number of 3 on greenfield sites, because otherwise we end up with this cliff again, And I can assure you that if we do go for 11, we will see every housing scheme come forward. We'll only have 10 houses there. It doesn't matter how big or how small they'll be, there will only be 10. And therefore, the Section 106 monies that our communities, because this isn't Torbay Council's money, it's our community's money that comes forward, just will be non-existent. Therefore, I move forward this objection tonight, asking the Mayor to reconsider this, to look at the consultation that we had, and to change his mind, instead of 11, to go back to 3. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do you have a seconder?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Then I will open a debate on the objection. Have you all read it? Do you have it? It was sent out with the agenda. Councillor Darling, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And a few days ago, Mr. Chair, I think you were there as well, we had the pleasure of consulting with our community in the afternoon and the evening at the Grand Hotel. And it was somewhat hijacked by concerns over homelessness in Torbay and shame on you, Gordon Oliver, from concerned members of the community who are concerned about the criminalisation of homelessness. And I think that this issue demonstrates why this is the wrong approach, and this is wrong-headed by our elected mayor. Whilst he slavishly says, this is what the government says, so we should follow it, I think that we need to bear in mind that we are local government representatives, and we are representing our community. We have half the average number of affordable housing in Torbay compared to the national average, and the fact that we have so many people in recent years sleeping on our streets is almost like the tip of the iceberg of the homeless crisis that we face in Torbay. I'm well aware that colleagues like Councillor Carter and the other Councillor Darling behind me who support town centre seats have massive housing and multi-occupation issues because of our lack of affordable housing. And we're only going to crack this through a qualitative approach of making sure that wherever there is an opportunity, we grasp it. My worry is that Mayor Gordon Oliver is on a seek and destroy approach to the need for affordable housing, and so therefore what we need to do is object. I would encourage colleagues to back this objection because we have a desperate need, and that meeting where people were very concerned about homelessness is purely the tip of the iceberg, and we have increasing levels of deprivation in Torbay, and choosing to turn your back on it as proposed here this evening by our Conservative elected mayor is shameful. Thank you.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I think, again, we see the mayoral recommendation at odds with the officer's recommendation. This, of course, the executive and the mayor is entitled to do, but in my opinion, this is becoming the norm rather than the exception. It's worth mentioning the recent Local Government Association report, findings, if you like, that identifies the lack of pace of this council, and also the inability of the mayor and the executive to work with members. And I'm afraid this is yet another example of this happening. So I would totally support the objection, Chair.
Mayor Oliver.
Thank you, Chairman. I know that elected mayors aren't popular with elected members, but well, with some, not with others. However, within probably 12 or 15 months' time, 25% of all local government will have one. The reason for my particular suggestion of adhering not only just to the government guidelines, but we both share the same ambition, and that is to see more affordable housing built in Torbay. So where would you go about that? The lower threshold, I believe, penalises small builders and small self-build schemes. And if you're going to see more houses built, you don't penalise the small firms and the small builders who make a very valuable and substantial contribution to creating more affordable housing in Torbay. That's my reason for it. I believe that my proposal will see at the end of the day more affordable houses built in Torbay, not less. And the government guidance, because that's what it is there for a purpose. It's based on substantial experience of what's happened elsewhere. And if you make the penalties, the cost substantially more when you're building them, and if they're not economic, it's like some of the local authorities that have a social housing threshold of 50%. And there are some still, I believe. That means that in those areas no social housing and affordable housing is built because the threshold is so high. So if you're not careful, you'll deter the small builder. Many of those may not be that aware of this situation, though, because some of the sites and some of the developments won't come into fruition for some while. So my main purpose, my sole purpose, is to see more social housing built, more affordable housing built in Torbay, and that's the reason I'm supporting the government guidelines. But also I feel it's important that we give local builders local employment. On the employment issue, we talked about deprivation. We have the best figures for employment for 34 years at Torbay. I just remind people of the benefits of the last few years of the new road, the economic benefits of other achievements we've had. That's the best figure since 1983, since records began. So a lot of good news out there, but we need to build on that literally by having more affordable housing. And I believe this is the way you'll achieve that. The significance of 3, I think, is a major deterrent for small builders building more of these homes.
Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Chairman. I've referred once already to the post-truth politics that's being put about at today's council meeting. It started with Councillor Lewis and now it's spread to Councillor Darling. I mean, we know that the meeting for the consultation last week at the Grand Hotel, I was there as well, so in fact this is where Councillor Darling's story falls to the ground, because other people were there, and we saw that we saw all too clearly that the people there who were protesting with absolutely the best intentions had actually been misled, I believe, into thinking that the Mayor had invoked a bylaw, which of course he hasn't. All he's done is say that there should be a consultation about issues including the homeless, the rough sleepers and other people in the bay that need our assistance. Now, how on earth that can be dragged into a discussion here about particular numbers of houses that may or may not fall under the supplementary planning guidance is beyond me. But clearly,
Councillor, this is not particularly relevant. Can you move on?
I think it's hugely relevant, because you listened to Councillor Darling talking about last week's meeting. I thought you'd be only too happy to hear me rattling on about last week's meeting. But anyway, obviously there's one rule for the leader of the Liberal Democrats and another for the leader of UKIP.
Mr. Chairman, 16.12.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Standing order 16.12. This debate is drifted so far away from the subject matter in hand that I think it would be useful to try to get back to the subject matter.
I agree with that. Councillor Parrott, can you stick to the subject, please?
Far be it from me, Mr. Chairman, to point out that the Mayor's being attacked for the wrong reasons, but there we are. I know that's the game that's played in this chamber. Let's look at these numbers. I mean, the Mayor has actually talked about guidance from ministers, and so has Councillor King. I'd like some further clarification on that point before deciding how to vote, because unlike most members, I suggest I come here and actually make my mind up on the day. Thank you.
Councillor O'Dwyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just some facts, really. The planning contributions are not allowed to be a tax on development. The sums provided for are to help mitigate planning issues
for their communities that they're built in. We do have issues in Torbay with affordable housing, and the level of 3 dwellings on greenfield sites is in the local plan already. If a development is unviable due to this levy, the developers have full rights to challenge the local authority, argue their case, and reduce the fee. So I don't really have any problems with the viability argument. Also, this level does not create the artificial cliff at where future developments will be built, i.e. many developments with 10 houses, no affordable housing, or an affordable contribution by those developers. Thank you.
Councillor Lewis, you reserved your right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm in agreement of the reducing the level to 3. And there are examples out there in Torbay, quite recent ones. The Palm Court is a prime example. When it was 14, before they had to build affordable homes or give a contribution to affordable homes, how many did they build? 14. They then built 14 holiday homes, so you didn't have to pay a contribution. So the whole of that Palm Court site paid no 106 affordable housing contribution. Can that be right? And I would say to the mayor, he says small builders. What defines a small builder? Is it a man who builds small houses? Because you can have a house of 3 million in Wellswood that a builder builds. Is he a small builder? You could have a small builder who builds 15 houses. Is he a medium-sized builder? I don't know how you're defining it, Mr. Mayor. Also, as my good friend Councillor Dwyer said, there is a provision that if a small builder, let's take it that you meant a small builder, one-man band, 2 people in it, if a small builder wanted to convert a house into, say, 4 flats, but it wasn't affordable to give a 106 money, albeit that it would be a small amount, then he can go to the planning department and say, look, I want to build those 4 houses, but here are the figures, it doesn't stack up. It is then up to the planning department to say, well, yeah, you're right, okay, well, we'll send it to committee, etc. So there is a way out. But by doing the 3, it stops the scenario that I've just explained in Palm Court. All my good friends, the councillors for Wellswood, if you built 5 houses there, with a lovely view over the bay at £3 million each, 15 million, 20 million pound project, they were paid no 106 money whatsoever. Whereas another small builder who builds 15 homes, 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms, they then have to pay a lot of money on 106 money. So that can't be right. If you reduce it to 3, as we are proposing, it cuts out those people who can afford to pay. Those who can't afford to pay will be helped by the council. So I hope the mayor will listen to the Conservative group, take sound advice, and vote for it to come down to 3. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the opportunity to respond, Chairman. I haven't changed my...
Mayor Oliver, you wish to make a point of personal explanation, so that's what you need to ask the chairman's permission to do. But it needs...
I can understand the points that are being made, but developments have to be successful.
Mayor Oliver, this is a response,
yes.
Not a point of personal explanation. Please take a seat.
Okay, we'll cover it another time.
Councillor King, do you wish to respond?
In view of the fact there's an objection there, here, Mr. Chairman, I request we go straight to the vote.
Then we go to the vote. Thank you. Those in favour of the objection, please raise your hands. Those against? Any abstentions? The objection's carried. We will now move to the next. If there are no other objections, we will move to the next item. Item 12, Special Responsibility Allowance, Chairman of Investments Committee. Please refer to page 234. Can Councillor Mills please put his motion to the Council?
Thank you, Chairman. I do apologise for my leg's giving me a bit of a chip at the moment. Painkillers haven't kicked in. Yes, members, as you're all aware, we have a special responsibility allowance which we give to chairmen of various committees. We now have a new committee, the Investment Committee, where at the moment, as far as the Constitution is concerned, there is not a special responsibility allowance. This actually came up with the Independent Remuneration Panel, as you see on 3.1 actually stated that the allowance should be £4,099. In fact, this would then put that chair above the rest of all the other chairs. The allowance is 3,405. So I am therefore recommending and proposing that a special responsibility allowance for the chairman of the investment committee be set at £3,405 and that the members' allowance scheme be updated accordingly. Thank you.
Councillor, do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to second the motion.
I will now open it to debate. Any debate, Councillor Carter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really find it difficult to support this. We've spent this evening talking about cutbacks, cutting back things for people and people outside that can't cope with things, and money's really tight. I've even heard people say on the other side, these are difficult times. And here are we talking about adding to the allowance scheme and adding and taking more money from the council to pay to councillors to chair a meeting. And I really cannot support this at this time. I feel that we should be cutting back and showing the way forward and not putting an allowance on this chair position.
Councillor Thomas David.
Thank you. I wasn't going to respond because I was just trying to hopefully move on with the meeting. However, I think it does require a response from myself. This allowance will not be drawn. The chairman of audit is also the same chairman for the investment committee, so this in real terms will cost the council no more money. I think it is important, if what you're saying is if you don't agree with the allowance for the chairman, every committee that the council has actually has an SRA attached, a special responsibility allowance attached to that particular chairman. If you're saying that you wish to revisit that, well, that's a whole different subject. However, this has gone through the independent review panel. There are special responsibility allowances attached to lead roles for overview and scrutiny. I'm not sure who is those members on the Liberal Democrat group, but I'm sure that they'll... Sorry? Okay, Councillor Stocks and Councillor Doggett. So, and what we've done is we've put this actually in line with that at 3405. It is absolutely in line with the special responsibility allowances that members within your group receive for as part of the work that they do on the overview and scrutiny. However, the investment committee is scheduled to meet every fortnight. The work that exists within overview and scrutiny is a different kind of work and works through a task and finish group. So, you know, it is a misdemeanour to say that this is going to cost the council an additional £3,000 in reality, it won't, because that one person is doing two jobs, and as you know, the Constitution says that a member cannot claim two allowances. Thank you.
Councillor Stockman.
I just wanted to say, though, in principle, I might not agree with everybody getting extra, but if you do the job properly, I think you're worth having the extra money, to be perfectly honest. I think I've noticed a huge difference in the last 5 years of the amount of work that a councillor needs to do, and in a lead position, I actually do think it warrants the extra money. That's just my thought on it. I know how much work I put in for overview and scrutiny year on year, and I just have the ordinary allowance. So anybody that's going to be in a lead position needs to be, you know, on the ball, doing their work and earning that money, whether it's a dual position at the moment or what happens in the future, who knows. But if you're put in that position, as you're moving forward, you're going to be expected to earn that money.
Councillor Murray, were you indicating you wish to speak or just showing us your pen?
Yes, Chair. I would argue that the Investment Committee is probably one of the most important committees on this council. It's, though you Miss Woollock wouldn't let me sit on it, I did sit in on last night's meeting, which lasted 3 to 4 hours, I guess, and it's all about investing in the future of Torbay and Torbay Council. If you query whether this chairman should be given an allowance on this committee, perhaps you should review all the other committees' chairmen, because half of them don't do their work. But that's another story. But at the end of the day, this, as I say, this is a new major committee that is looking to invest in the future, and we should recognise it.
Councillor Darling-Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I have enormous respect for Councillor Alan Tyman. I think he is one of the most valued members on this council, and it is no way any reflection on him as an individual. I think that it's more what is the public perception here of what we as a local authority are doing. You know, the fact of the matter is there is another allowance occurring. If it's the case that, well, don't worry, it's the same person doing the same job, well, as I've said outside of this room to other colleagues, perhaps we should have set up an audit and investment committee, and then that could have covered both angles of this. It may well be a heavy workload, but we have, you know, it is not entirely unrelated to each other. And somebody who has skills in the audit work equally would be able to bring those skills to bear, as we can see by the example of it. It's what messages are we sending out to the public here? We're looking at trying to balance our budgetary crisis, thanks to our Conservative government, on the backs of the poor in Torbay, and at the same time saying we can find extra money to pay those fat cat councillors. That's what many people will see out there. At the public consultation meeting, they were saying, oh, any councillors who aren't here at this meeting, maybe we ought to reduce them because, you know, it's only the executive who decide everything. So we are not held in high regard by our communities, believe it or not. This may be news to our Conservative colleagues, but the reality is we're giving our communities a stick to beat us with, and rightly so, because at a time when this council, this Conservative council, is persecuting the poor in Torbay, we're giving an extra wad of cash, whether it's notional or in reality, to councillors.
Thank you, Councillor. I will take 3 more. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Chairman, and Councillor Darling quite rightly talks about the perception of the public on this one. And so just to clarify, following Councillor Thomas's intervention, this actually attaches itself to the post and not to the person. So if the post holder were to change, that would then attract the guards. I think it's a serious matter. If Councillor Moore is saying the chairmen are not doing their jobs, and I think a public perception there would be very, very
before if that's the case. I mean, I know of nothing like that, but I mean, if it is the case, then I think it's a very serious allegation to be making at a time like this.
Chairman, personal explanation. Sorry, I got it totally wrong. It's not hard. It's not the chairman, it's the executive leads.
Chairman, well, I would suggest that that's an even more serious allegation, and I think that actually I would ask that the monitoring officer actually looks into that, please, and finds out what's going on. Perhaps we can follow this up after the meeting, because I think it's an appalling situation were that to be true. Secondly, or thirdly, Councillor Darling quite rightly draws a link between the Audit Committee and the Investment Committee. And I would ask from a public perception point of view whether having the same chairman of Audit Committee and Investment Committee, when the Audit Committee is responsible for actually auditing the work of the Council, is the right way forward. I personally think Councillor Timon is a superb and hard-working councillor, but I think these are matters for public perception, and therefore I don't think this particular debate has covered councillors in any glory. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Timon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As personally holding the position at the moment of the Chairman of the Investment Committee, I didn't really want to speak about this, but I thought I should remind members that we are about to embark on re-looking at the Constitution in terms of changing our total form of governance from 2019. There will be the need in that to look at the whole structure of committees, how they're set up, how they're remunerated. We are only looking for a solution to take us from now through to that date, and I don't think anything we do now is going to impinge upon the long term. The Investment Committee has only been in existence for a few weeks. I would tend to say already that I think it's probably going to take more of my time and effort and mental capacity than the Audit Committee job. But I mean, that's just matching the two together. I certainly don't, I wish to carry on doing both jobs, and I don't think there is a conflict between the two. The performance of the Council is actually far more monitored through overview and scrutiny than it is by the Audit Committee. The Audit Committee's role is not to look and see how the other committees of the Council function. It actually has got the responsibility to look at the performance, management and risk of the Council, and it is dealing with aspects to do with the accounts, etc. But it does not interrogate how the Harbours Committee works, or any of those things like that, unless there is a specific request to it from either the Executive, the Mayor or the Chief Officer to so do.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm increasingly feeling uncomfortable and disbelief is creeping over me. We're actually challenging paying an allowance to those who actually do the work. In reality, I think that Councillor Timon alluded to the change in constitution. If this council was paid by the committees it attended, the committees it actually worked on, and the amount of work each individual actually did, there would be an increasingly vast difference between the least hard-working ones and the most hard-working ones. So I would argue that anyone who actually takes on a challenging role, like the Investment Committee Chairman, and I was there last night, 4 hours we sat, and it was a great debate, very, very complex. We went through enormous detail with a possible investment opportunity, and it was very, very technical. And I think it's worth every penny, and I think people should stop arguing about a small allowance, tiny amount of money in the great scheme of things, and start putting their own backs into the job.
Councillor Mills, do you wish to respond?
Yes, if I may, please forgive me, I've said for this bit that I didn't realise we was going to take so long and have such an interesting debate on this. But I do think that it's right that this does go into the members' allowance scheme. If people don't want to take the allowance, perhaps they could take a leaf out of the mayor's and my book. The mayor only receives 50% of his allowance and I only receive 75% of mine. So perhaps some of your others perhaps might like to give it back. Thank you. If we go to the vote.
Thank you. Then we will go to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand high. Those against? Any abstentions? The motion's carried. We will now move to items 13, Capital Plan Update 2016-2017. Item 14, Revenue Budget Monitoring 2016-17, Quarter 2. Item 15, Standing Order D11, in review to overview and scrutiny. And item 16, Summary of Decisions. These reports are for noting and no vote is necessary. Thank you. Item 17, exclusion of the press and public. Can Mayor Oliver please put his motion to the council to exclude the press and public?
Chairman, I move that in view of the following discussions to take place, that the press and public be excluded from the meeting.
Is there a seconder?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to second that, and obviously we include all sound systems and YouTube as well. Thank you.
Then we will go to the vote. Thank you. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I respectfully ask that the doors are also closed, please?
Indeed. Now, please can the press and public leave the meeting?